Ruby. Long before emeralds became the currency of Minecraft's trading system, Notch had originally planned to use a completely different gem for that role. Ruby was designed to be the item villagers would use for trading, and it even made it quite far into development. Texture files for the ruby existed in the game's code, and the ore was intended to generate underground just like other minerals. However, the plan was quietly dropped before the trading system ever launched. The reason most commonly cited is that Notch himself was red-green colorblind, making it difficult to distinguish ruby ore from redstone ore in the ground. Rather than redesign the texture, the decision was made to replace the gem entirely. Emerald was introduced instead when the trading system finally arrived in the 1.3 update, and Ruby was erased from the game entirely. It never appeared in any public release, which makes it one of the few items that Minecraft players only know about through development screenshots and texture file discoveries. Quiver. Arrows in Minecraft have always just stacked directly in your inventory, but at one point Notch experimented with giving them their own dedicated storage slot. The quiver was designed to hold arrows separately, freeing up inventory space and making the bow and arrow system feel more like a proper archery setup. It appeared in early development snapshots and was even textured and partially coded. The idea was logical enough, since carrying dozens of arrows alongside tools, food, and building blocks makes inventory management more complicated than it needs to be. Despite that, the quiver was never finished or released. It sat in development limbo and was eventually abandoned without much explanation. Years later, when the quiver came up in community discussions, Mojang acknowledged it but never brought it back. The inventory slot it would have occupied simply never made it into the final game, and arrows continued to stack normally as they always have in the released versions. Crying Obsidian. The version of Crying Obsidian most players know today is a decorative block used to craft respawn anchors in the Nether. But there was an entirely different version of this block that existed much earlier, and that original form was completely removed from the game. Back in Beta 1.5, Notch introduced Crying Obsidian as a way for players to set their spawn point. Before beds existed, players who died would always return to the world's original spawn location, which was a real problem in survival gameplay. Crying Obsidian was meant to solve that by acting as a personal spawn setter, similar to what beds eventually became. However, the mechanic was scrapped before it ever reached a stable state, and the block was deleted entirely. When beds were added to the game shortly after, the spawn setting problem was considered solved, and Crying Obsidian seemed like a forgotten experiment. It stayed that way for nearly a decade until Mojang revisited the concept during the Nether update, reimagining the block with a completely new purpose and a new texture that gave it its name. Gears. This one is almost unknown to most players, even longtime fans of the game. Gears were mechanical blocks that Notch experimented with extremely early in Minecraft's development, well before redstone existed as a system. They appeared as spinning, interlocking mechanical parts that could theoretically be used to build functional contraptions. The concept pointed toward a kind of engineering gameplay that Minecraft eventually developed through redstone, pistons, and observers. But gears were never completed or released to the public in any meaningful form. They existed briefly in very early test builds and were abandoned long before the game had a real player base. What makes them interesting is what they represented, because they show that Notch was thinking about mechanical systems from the very beginning. The direction that idea eventually took became one of the most beloved parts of Minecraft, but the gears themselves disappeared quietly before anyone outside of early development ever got to use them. Rose. For many players who started the game before 2013, the rose is genuinely missed. It was a simple red flower that generated naturally across the world, and it served as one of the primary sources of red dye. The rose was part of Minecraft from almost the very beginning of the game's development, and became a recognizable part of the visual landscape. In the Java Edition 1.7 update, which introduced a significant overhaul of the flower system, the rose was removed and replaced by the poppy. Mojang's reasoning was that a poppy was a more botanically accurate red wildflower for the kind of temperate biomes Minecraft features. The change was practical, but it was not warmly received by everyone. A large portion of the community had grown attached to the rose, and its removal sparked genuine discussion about whether familiar elements should be replaced even when the replacement is technically more sensible. The poppy functions identically for crafting purposes, but the rose has never returned, and it remains one of the most frequently discussed removals in the game's history. But before we move on, I would like to thank our today's sponsor, Noping. If you deal with high ping or unstable connection while gaming, Noping reroutes your traffic for a faster, more stable route to the game server. It reduced my ping noticeably and gameplay felt smoother, Link is in the description if you want to try it. Now back to the video. Horse saddles. When horses were first added to Minecraft in the 1.6 update, the game also introduced a craftable variant of the saddle specifically designed for them. Regular saddles had always existed as a treasure-only item, something you found in chests rather than crafted. The horse saddle was briefly available as a crafted item, giving players a way to obtain mounted control over their horses through normal gameplay progression. It made a reasonable amount of sense, since horses required significant taming effort, and having a craftable saddle felt like a logical reward for that effort. However, the craftable horse saddle was removed fairly quickly after its introduction, and the regular saddle became the only option for riding both horses and pigs. The decision consolidated the saddle system, but took away a progression mechanic that many players appreciated. To this day, the inability to craft a saddle remains a common complaint in the community, and the brief existence of the horse saddle is often brought up as evidence that Mojang once agreed the system should work differently. Custom spawn eggs. In older versions of the game, players could access Ender Dragon spawn eggs and Iron Golem spawn eggs through creative mode or commands. On paper, it seemed like a natural extension of how spawn eggs worked for other mobs, but these two entities were a different case entirely. The Ender Dragon and Iron Golem are both massive, powerful entities, and spawning them through a simple right-click caused serious problems. Terrain destruction, significant lag, and unintended griefing made these eggs far more disruptive than useful in normal gameplay. Mojang's response was to remove both spawn eggs from the base game entirely. Players who needed to summon these entities could still do so through commands, but the eggs themselves were taken out to prevent casual misuse and the technical issues that came with it. It was a straightforward removal driven by practical necessity rather than any design change, and it stands as a reminder that even small items can have a large impact when the entities attached to them are built on a different scale than everything else. Locked chest. The locked chest has a story unlike almost anything else on this list because it was not removed for technical or design reasons. It was placed into the game as a joke. On April 1st, 2011, Notch added a locked chest to Minecraft as part of an April Fool's event. The block appeared naturally in Worlds and could not be opened through any normal means. A message would appear telling players they needed a Steve Company supply crate key to open it, directing them to a fake online store. The entire thing was a deliberate prank with no real function. After the event ended, the block was removed from the game entirely. It served its purpose as a one-day gag and was never intended to be a permanent part of Minecraft's item list. Despite that, it became one of the more memorable pieces of the game's early culture, partly because of how unexpected it was, and partly because it reflected the kind of playful development style that defined Minecraft's early years. Players who were around at the time still remember the confusion before the joke became clear, though its texture remained in the game files for a while before being wiped completely.